Welcome to Conversations with Puzzles of Color. Today we are talking to Briana Payne, who is an anthropologist and teacher, and we're going to be talking about mental health and her experiences in China. Thank you for joining us, Briana.
I am so excited to be here to talk with you all.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
It's been a while. We actually
know
each other. That's cool. We haven't seen each other in so long, but it's always good to hang out with you and see you before you go off to China and living your world traveler life.
It's all right. I'll save room for y'all to
visit. So great.
Yeah. So tell everybody, give everybody a little intro into who you are, please.
Definitely. So I'm Briana, and I have a master's in anthropology. And through my experiences with anthropology, I decided to spend some time teaching. So for the last 2 years, I was in China teaching, and with COVID, I had to sort of regroup and come back home for a little while, and I am actually off again in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, to start another 3 years in China.
Wow.
Amazing.
Another 3 years. 2 wasn't enough for you, huh?
No, it was just sort of shy of being able to get all of the things together.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe, I mean, that's a long time away from home. Like, I thought about doing like study abroad, and even that, like a semester or a year or whatever away, I was like, I don't know if I can do it, but that's a dedication, that's commitment to do.
One of the things this time when I went, or I decided I was going to go back to China, the 3 years actually took me a little while to accept the application and the process for that school, because 3 years, you're right. 2 years the first time was like, sure, it'll go by fast. That's nothing. But it's something about adding that third year that really made me scared.
Yeah.
It really did. And I had to sit on it.
Yeah.
I know when we went to China, well, me and my friends, we committed to 1 year, but when we got there, we're like, okay, so 6 months?
You really don't know until you get there. That's
Once
true.
We got there, you get accustomed
Acclimated.
to this. Acclimated,
Yeah.
Then it was like, okay, we can stay a year. It was great. We had a great time.
Yeah.
Learned a lot. Not as much Chinese as we would like to learn, a lot of Mandarin, but it was still great.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I decided to do 3 years, because my first time there, I wanted to add another year, and then I couldn't because I came home and was stuck here during COVID. And so a lot of schools won't even take you if you're not going to take a 3-year contract. You know, that's pretty normal for international schools. So I really had to have a moment, and I actually had to think about, do you remember how you felt in China alone?
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt being away from family and on a different time zone? And I really did have to sit with myself and sort of weigh those pros and cons, because 3 years is a very long time, especially when you're on your own. You're 100% on your own.
How did you get into mental health as a, study or something you're interested in?
So I never really focused on mental health. And I don't know whether that's just like I'm okay, there's nothing, I hadn't experienced anything that really, I was concerned about my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I have been fortunate to not have had a very difficult childhood. I didn't have a difficult young adult life, and so I wasn't really conscious about the importance of mental health, as a preventative, and then just as overall wellness.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really get into mental health until my grandmother died when I was in college. Mm-hmm. And she died on the day that I was supposed to fly to Guatemala for field school. And I was going to be there for a month. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time that I really had to, being an anthropologist, you travel a lot. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time that I had to realize that something could happen and I could be on the other side of the world and not be at home with my family, right? And so going through that experience, I experienced a lot of depression after she died, because once we had her funeral, I flew out the same day.
Wow.
And I landed in Guatemala that night, and I was there for, 3 or so weeks. And having to grieve on my own for those 3 weeks was an experience that has stuck with me. And I think it's made me more conscious about other people's experiences and the things that they go through alone. And you don't necessarily know about. And so that was really difficult for me to continue with work, to continue with studying a culture and completing field work and writing a paper and interacting with people and still sort of navigating this internal struggle.
Yeah.
After that, you know, I came home and I sort of got it together. You know, loss is loss. You know, you feel it hard sometimes and then it goes away and then it hits again. But when I moved to China and had to really be on my own, I think that that's when it all came back. Prior to that, I had done a lot of group, you know, research and going with other people, you know, to India, and we would stay with people. But being in China, it was just me in my apartment, and I had to go home to myself every day. And a lot of times I realized that people cannot be by themselves, because once you're by yourself, you have to really identify some of the things that are in your life.
Feelings.
Yes, and there's nobody there to get you out of it, right? So winter hit, my first winter in China, and that's, oh my goodness. Seasonal depression is a thing, y'all. And I think when that first winter hit, and it was just dark. At all times. And there's air pollution and you don't see the sun. And there's a 14-hour time difference between home. And that's when I really was like, you have got to build a community. You have got to identify signs that let you know that you're not okay. And then once you've identified those signs, you need to make sure that that community can help you to get through whatever you're going through, because you're not, a lot of times you can't get yourself out of it. You really do have to reach out to people.
How do you go about finding like a community to be there with you, to be mentally strong? Because I know in our community, as you know, people of color, therapy and mental health is not, you know, talked about as much. So like, how is that something that you can really be vulnerable enough to talk to somebody about? How do you go about finding that person?
That is so true. That's one of the reasons why when I was younger, I was just like, mental health, what is that? Because we don't talk about it. It's not like, you know, I went to a therapist ever since I was, you know, 5, just because, like, that's going to see my doctor the same way I would go, you know, to see my primary physician. And so since we don't have that, and we have that stigma that, oh, you went to a therapist, you know, you telling them all your business. And that's the family, you know, that we ain't nothing wrong with us, right? Like, that is so true. In China, I was fortunate to make a group of friends. Now, I always talk about this because, you know, you have people that you know, they're not your friends, right? They're not the people that you can go to with your problems and you can feel comfortable, you know, saying things to them and not feeling judged and feeling like they are there for your best interest, right? So a lot of it is just finding your group that you can be 100% with, because especially when you're talking about things that pertain to mental health, sometimes you are sharing some deep things. You know, you're sharing some things that you don't want people going off and telling somebody, you know, down the street on the corner, you know. I'm not gonna say nothing, and then they text a friend, you don't count, I'm gonna tell you, girl. Right? So when I was in China, I made friends, and when you're an expat, when you're alone in a country, you really build community quickly, because if you don't have a community, you're not going to survive, right? And so the community that I built was super grounded in support. You know, it was a minority group for the most part. You know, everybody was African American, which helps a lot. Just being able, especially when you're in a different country and having that experience as a Black person, like in China, for example. So having them there and having them with similar goals, you know, similar sort of outlooks, you know, that similar, you don't have to have experience that are the same, but you do have to have sort of this world view, I guess, and have these commonalities. So finding that group was really a priority. And I don't think that our group was really finalized until maybe like winter of that first year, because you don't know people like that. Like, I don't know you, I got to feel you out first. And then maybe January or so of my first year, I did build that community. And we ended up sort of adding new people once they came into the school, you know, the next year. But finding a group that you can feel comfortable with is so important. And you can let go of people if they don't fit. Like, people feel bad, like, I don't want to, right? Like, I don't want to be me. But no, like, this is about your mental wellness, right? You are, and I don't know if that's a millennial thing, but like, I'm going to do what's best for me.
Yeah.
And not necessarily to the extent of other, but
not to your detriment.
But I am going to look out for me. So if this group is bonded and this group is sort of looking out for the best of this group and you don't fit, then we can hang out with you sometimes, but you're not invited to Black brunch. It's not happening, right?
So you mentioned like that, when your grandma died, you had to kind of learn like when you were not okay, like what are the signs? Like how did you go about that? Because I know that's something that took a while. I think you mentioned that before.
With her death, it was sort of, I grieved in Guatemala, right? But coming home was a different experience. You're in those same areas where she would be, right? And so I think it hit me and I had like a delayed grief. I had like grief part 2, right? And so, we would go to church and she wouldn't be in her seat. And everybody else had experienced this together.
Yeah.
And here I am coming back a month later and now doing this. And everybody sort of had that moment together. So one of the things that I noticed after she died and coming back home was I'm an only child, and so I like people and I love like interacting with people. I'm an anthropologist, right? But I don't like people that much. Like I have to reset.
So like an introvert that way.
An extroverted. What is the combination? Something.
So introverts need to recharge by being alone. Extroverts can recharge by being out with people.
Right, and so people always assume I'm an extrovert.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, I feel like
I just want silence. Yeah. Right. And so I noticed that sort of recharging that you talked about, that being alone, it just started extending and extending. And I wouldn't respond to phone calls and I wouldn't respond to text messages and I wouldn't talk to people. And it was just sort of pulling everything inside, right? I wouldn't get out of bed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change clothes. I wouldn't take a shower. I would just sit there, and I would just go to sleep. And then I'd wake up and then I'd sleep. And then, days are passing. And part of that community, I have a really good friend and she would just message me every day, and I would ignore her. She'd just keep messaging and I think part of that community is having those people that know your signs as well. Yeah. And so they can continue to reach out to you even though you don't want them to reach out to you, right? And so another friend was like, if I hadn't seen you today, I was going to come straight to your house and get you out of bed, right? And so I was able to identify some of those after she died. And then once I went through that and was able to, get through that experience, I didn't have those, like depressing feelings until much later in China. Right. And so that was 2011. Right. And I moved to China in 2018. So this whole time I've like gotten over this and I'm like, yay, I'm like on the up and up. This is great. Yeah. And then you go home to your own apartment in the dark and, you don't have that communication. And then I started noticing the same things. When I would get home from work, I go get in my bed. I may not order food because in China you can order everything. Right. So I just would not leave my house.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too cold to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's dark.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't feel like fighting people when they want to take my picture. Right? And then it was just like I was doing all of these things and then I just wouldn't leave. And then having experienced that before, I was able this time to say, this seems familiar and something's not right. Yeah. And then I was able to tell my friend, hey, tomorrow, I don't care what I say. We need to go somewhere after work. Or I don't care what I say. Call me, and answer. And then I had the friends that I could really trust that would have like a key to my apartment, because you're alone in the country. You're like, I need somebody in case anything happens. Yeah. And so I was like, hey, and they would stop by and they would just knock. Hey, I brought dinner. Get up. Put some clothes on. Like, let's eat. Let's watch a show. Those types of things.
So, and I just realized, like, with being in China, because I was like, did you ever consider therapy? But, like, you didn't even, I guess you could have found a therapist, but, like, it would be a different
I had a hard enough time figuring out dentists. Like, let alone a therapist. And finding a good therapist is hard in itself. Finding one that you can click with and you can, but thankfully now a lot of people are, like, teletherapists, and so
definitely.
I am so excited about being able to go now and still finding someone and being in contact with them. Like
Yeah,
that is one good thing out of this whole crazy last couple of years.
We were actually in China when it kind of started happening. I don't know how the timeline lined it up, but how did that affect you out there?
I think that of my experiences sort of having downtimes, like those times where I feel depressed or those times that I know that my mental health is not on point. I think that the year after, so that would have been this January, right? The year after coming home from China is probably the lowest that I've ever been.
Oh, really?
And so being home. When did you come home? Like COVID hits and like what?
So
for y'all,
in China, COVID, it was like December in Wuhan, right?
Right.
And so I'm, not in the Wuhan province, but I was traveling with my dad and uncle, and they went home in January at the beginning of, we did New Year. So they went home like the second week of January, right? And it was so crazy because they went home. We had been all over China traveling. Yeah. And they went home, and a week later I flew home. And that was January like 27th.
Oh, wow. So you got out, fairly early.
Yeah. Now in China though, for here it's early, right? Because here, COVID, everybody is like, it was spring break, right? Like that's the sort of the starting point here, right? But I had already
heard about it.
We had already been locking down.
Oh, got it.
We were on Chinese New Year, and so they had just left, and I was actually planning to travel within China and get that in before I came home for the summer. And I will never forget looking at the news, and it's all in Chinese, right? So you're like scrolling and messaging screenshots to your Chinese friends, and they're like, oh yeah, it's crazy, blah 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 blah, and that feeling of being in a country alone, you don't speak the language, you live like 3 hours from the airport, you are a 12 and a half hour flight from your house, and there is a pandemic. It is like, I will never forget that feeling. Yeah. And that's when you really realize how small you are in the world.
Yeah.
You are like this little bitty dot, and you are alone.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy because, we are stressed because we were concerned, like, are we going to be able to get back into America? Because eventually they're going to close something down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so we were trying to figure out, well, should we go back home or should we stay here? Like, which would be a better choice?
Yeah.
But if we go back home, will we be able to get back here?
Yeah.
But we need to go home because if this spreads, then we want to be at home with some American doctors. Yeah. At least because they speak English, right? Or, where I feel like I can get the best care.
Yeah. Right. Did you have friends that did stay?
So we spent, I want to say, a week going back and forth about what is happening and are we going home and blah, blah, blah. Is this actually serious? And it was when we realized like how serious SARS was in Hong Kong, right? And how it spread, that we were like, maybe we should take this, seriously. Because I had actually said, I'm gonna go home for 2 weeks for Chinese New Year until this COVID stuff blows over and I'll just fly back to China and finish the rest of the school year. Like that's what I was like, I'm gonna go home for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't been home since the previous summer. Right. I was like, I'm gonna go home, hang out with my family, and come back once COVID's done. Right? And it was not until one of our Chinese friends sent us a message and they were like, you need to go home.
Really?
And when that Chinese friend, and it's not like a friend that we talk to, but it's a friend that knows things. And when that friend sent a message and we were like, okay. And it was just like, you need to go home. And we were just like, all right. So we went home, all of our circle went home, and it was crazy because Chinese New Year was early that year. And so a lot of people were still on vacation. So they weren't even in China.
Yeah.
And so some people got stuck in like Bali and Thailand for months.
Oh,
because they were on holiday.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they couldn't get back into China. So we went home. All of my circle went home, except one of my friends who had been in China for like, forever. She's been there forever. So she was the only one who was in my immediate friends that stayed. And then a few of my friends from like Australia went home. But it wasn't the same as here. So they've gone back.
Yeah.
You know, they were able to get back sooner.
Yeah.
So we were all here, and being in China, and you're trying to get out of the country, and there's no food. It's not like here where just toilet tissue was like in China, there was nothing. Things were closed down. You couldn't get any food, and it's hard enough.
Wow.
Like, I speak Mandarin, but it's you still don't speak enough
Yeah.
to know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, people are wearing masks. There are signs everywhere. You know, they're closing things down. There are temperature checks every time you get onto the freeway. Any exit ramp that you get off of, they're doing temperature checks. And they have the hazmat suits. And so
I saw the,
and so you feel so alone. And then I was like, well, let me navigate home, right? And that was even hard because you're like, are there going to be flights?
I was just to say, like, how'd you even get out the country? I know, like, they probably had trouble in customs, or customs, what is it?
Yeah.
Just getting through to America.
It was,
that would be tough.
Part of it was, my mom was like, I found a flight, just take it. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's like
so I packed up.
Whatever time.
And then I packed up and I was like, am I coming back here? I don't know. Right? So then I packed up my apartment just in case, which I'm glad I did. Got in a car, had to find a driver, had to figure out which cities were closed because by that time they were closing down cities. You could not go, you couldn't go between Fort Worth and Arlington.
Wow.
Like you literally could not cross city lines.
Wow.
And so finding a ride 2.5 hours to the airport, getting to the airport and waiting because you didn't know how early you'd have to leave. So I left super early. And you get to the airport and there were people everywhere.
Oh, it was packed?
And it was so, like, China is loud and busy. You know, like, I have never, ever experienced the silence that I have ever in China at that airport.
Wow.
Like, it was just the anxiety level.
Yeah.
The line was out the door. Like, it was insane. And then coming home, it was like, you know, you're on the airplane and people are just like, who are you? I don't know you. And you're wearing your mask. You don't want to take your mask off. Then you
no food
flying all of the whole flight. And then you get home, and I got home and I was like, oh my goodness, now I gotta like do all these things and I gotta quarantine. They're not gonna let me in. I'm gonna be here forever. No, it didn't happen. They let me through.
Wow. Wow.
Because we didn't know anything was happening at all. January?
January. I was like wearing my mask, and I will never forget. I was standing there and people were looking at us odd, right? And then at that point, I'm like Chinese, right? You're looking at me odd, right?
Yeah.
And I remember doing the check where they're like, welcome home, you know? And then I was like, I can take this off. Like, I can take this mask off. You don't want to take my, like, okay, all right.
You're not going to take my temperature?
So honestly, I did not have to do the 2-week quarantine, but I just went ahead and did it because I was like, I had
no idea what
I had been all over, and I was like, I would feel so guilty.
Yeah.
So I did the 2-week quarantine, which also doesn't help with your mental health because you're in the room by yourself and you're just like sitting and you're stressed.
You can't see anybody for sure. Then
and you're like, you're stressed and you have this sort of responsibility. You know, you're like, I don't want to be in contact with people.
Yeah.
So that was, and then just, it's kind of like living in an apartment by yourself. You have to entertain yourself, and sometimes you're just not in the right mind to do that.
Yeah.
Then when we locked down, I was kind of like, this is easy.
Been there. Like, at least you're not confined to your own room.
No, this is so easy. Like, all I got to do is stay in the house. Please. I got the Netflix. My mom, you know, we were there. And so it was like fine. And having had that time with her was also nice because I'd been gone for almost a year.
Yeah. So
having had that bonding time was actually really, really nice for us. And then, you know, we were teaching, and that was hard. It was a really hard year for me to end because, you know, you feel gypped. You know, you feel like my experience was cut short.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't get to finish, you know, my life there.
Yeah.
I didn't get to say goodbye because, you know, a lot of my friends were like, girl, I see you in 2 weeks. Have a fun trip, you know? And so that was the last thing I said to a lot of my friends.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I'm going to swing by the house real quick, get you a hug, and, you know, and I'll see you soon.
Right.
And then they're in different places. And you don't know when this is going to end. And then I was concerned because I had connection in China. So I was concerned with people I knew there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm thinking about people who live in different cities that I am friends with or, you know, had traveled with or visited. And I'm just like texting them, you know, how are y'all doing? You know, are you okay? And then my students, you know, were online and we had all traveled for the Lunar New Year. And so a lot of them weren't even in our city because they would not let anybody back. Yeah. So wherever you went for Chinese New Year, you were stuck. So a lot of them were trying to log into class, you know, and they're in a different city. You know, they're at the northern China where it's worse, or they're here and they're fine. Yeah. So that was also hard, trying to give them sort of a space where it's like school. Yeah. The problem was making them get it, like making sure they got an education, making sure that they felt like it was actually school, which, you know, is hard enough on online learning. You know, this is actually school, honey, you know. And the other biggest problem was the fact that I was teaching at night because of the time change.
Oh no, I didn't even think about that.
So that was hard because once again, I don't see any sun. Yeah. And I already know about the seasonal depression, and I know that one of the biggest things for me was to make sure that I got sunlight whenever I could, or like sunflowers, anything that made me feel like it was daytime. Yeah. And so knowing that that's one of my sort of signs is when it's like dark and dreary, it was really hard that last semester because I never really saw my mom because she was teaching. And so they would have virtual classes during the day and she'd try and be quiet, you know, while she's online teaching. Yeah. And then I would wake up like 6:30 p.m. and then be up for the rest of the day and have like staff meetings at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, right? Gosh. And so that was hard. And I definitely remember that just being like, can this year just be over? But I didn't want the year to be over because it was like that was all of China, you know, that I had left. Yeah. And then China opened. So my kids were back in school. So then I'm teaching full school days and they're in the classroom without masks on, you know, learning. But after a while, it was really draining because, you know, you're in the house all day. The time you're at night. Like I didn't have a real sleep schedule. Yeah. So that was really hard. And then once that was over, I was like, I'm never teaching again. I am never, ever teaching. I quit.
And then
I was like, I gotta teach because I need insurance, and if I get COVID, I gotta be able to go to the hospital. Oh my gosh. So I did teach. Here this school year. Okay. And that I did not want to, and that was really bad. That was a really bad like mental health. You know, like you know sometimes you have to make it through some things just because. And I knew it was gonna be a hard year.
Did you notice like with either Chinese students or American students, did you notice like there was any kind of mental health issues with them? Like were they feeling depressed? Like how were they faring?
The thing about the experience with COVID and teaching in China is the fact that they were not virtual as long. You know, China closed down. And by April, my students were in school without masks on. So another thing about Chinese kids are they wear masks all the time. Yeah. So the mask thing is not a problem. In China, we wear it because of the air pollution, right? Yeah. So that wasn't hard as it is for like young kids here, you know, keeping it on and being hot in it and, you know, that. So it was easy doing that COVID transition with the kids. They were like, sure, whatever. It sounds great. You know, it was nothing for them. Yeah. But also they did not have to experience it to the extent that students here did. You know, we didn't take our masks off until 2 weeks before school was out. And that was hard. You know, a lot of them were virtual the whole year and that was hard. And they don't have that. Some of my students didn't have that support at home. You know, they're already dealing with home life and school is their escape. And when you can't go to that escape and that support and something that's consistent and, you know, that routine, I noticed it was hard. And a lot of my students, when they came back to school, were so excited. And a lot of my students, whenever we would, you know, have someone who may have tested positive for COVID or, you know, contact tracing, they're like, please, 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 like, don't be me. Like, I don't want to go home. You know, they missed that. That's your community. School is that's your community. Right. So it was having my students in school, I noticed you know, that school year went a lot better for them. They felt a lot better. You know, they had people to talk with. COVID was hard, but at least they had their community. Right. I don't know as much for my students who were at home.
what are some tips for somebody who is part of a community and how they can better support their friends?
Yeah, definitely. We talk about this a lot. You can't be selfish. You have to be observant. Not to the nosiest point, right? But at least to the point where I can say, hey, something's not up. And they may not notice that something's not up because you're smiling, but I know that smile, and that's the fake smile, right? Like, that's just your smile to make it through the day.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not real. You have to be open. A lot of times when you're in a community, you have to trust each other. And sometimes you can't necessarily hold back some of those things because something that you think may be the problem, it could actually be something else. And your friend will be able to identify it, right? And even if you can't.
Yeah.
So it's about being open and honest and sort of loving each other to the point where it's like, I'm going to say this and I'm just going to tell you all the things. I need you to keep your opinions to yourself this time.
Yeah.
But let me know, what's wrong, right? Don't judge me, but let me know.
That's tough because I know even for me, just like, how do I know my mental, like what my struggles might be? Because I don't know. Like I said, it's not talked about in our community as much, or I know I kind of reluctant to therapy or whatever the case may be. But like, how do you know when you need it? How you identify it? Basically, I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't know how you.
Also, one of the things, since you're talking about like our community, is how do I know I can say this to you? Or how do I know that you're true? Yes, like you were honestly in this like I am.
Yeah.
Also, there's this huge stigma, and not necessarily for like Black women, but like Black men.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
We talk a lot.
Yeah.
We talk a lot.
Yeah.
I definitely am the I'm okay guy. I mean, I don't know, but I feel like I am sometimes.
Yeah.
I also don't know if it's like
how much of it's like a natural, like your personality,
Yeah,
versus how much of it's kind of a societal.
And then, and how much of it is I'm okay or I'm just coping.
Yeah.
Like getting through the day-to-day life.
Yeah.
One of the things that that makes me think about is, this year, January was my year home. And that was when I was saying I was at my lowest. And part of it was because the group of people that I had been with for the last year and a half that I saw every day, that we planned our goals with, we had our vision board parties. We continuously checked in on each other, hey, you don't look right. Do I need to filter? Do I need to like be the gate and like I will talk to people on your behalf today? They were gone.
Yeah.
And once you do find that group and you get so connected to them, once you've been taken away from them and you're hit with COVID or you're hit with being at home alone or you're hit with being back in the country and you literally live somewhere where nobody speaks English, the food is not the same, like all of that. That being pulled, I think that's when you really know you found your group. Like that was so hard for us. Yeah. And in March, spring break, I finally saw one of my friends, and I hadn't seen her since the December when I had left, when she left during COVID, right before COVID hit. And we actually sat down and talked about that because, she was having a hard time. And part of it was your community, what makes them your community is that they have some of those similar shared experiences. And one of the things that was hard for her was navigating coming home after living in China for 5-6 years. Yeah. Things are not the same.
Nobody has those same experiences that's here.
And then not only moving home, but being sort of taken from, it's not like you can get back. And we had no clue that China was going to open anytime soon.
Right.
And so one of the things we did talk about, it was like seeing her face. I was like, oh my goodness, I do have a community. I may not be able to physically touch them and get my hug or get my support, but they do still exist. And sitting down with her is when we really did. She's like, I knew that you were not okay. I was like, oh my goodness, I knew you weren't okay too, but I couldn't do anything because I wasn't okay. And just having that moment, sometimes it's just saying, I'm not okay. I have no idea why not. My attitude's bad. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't know why. Yeah. I don't want to put on clothes. I don't know why. I just know something's not okay. Yeah. I don't want to talk about it. Maybe I do, maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
And part of that is not even, you don't have to identify what your problem is. That's why you need a therapist.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But part of it is just acknowledging. That's your first step, right?
Yeah. Got you. Yeah.
I am not okay. And that's one of the things that I really did focus on at the beginning of the year was making people understand that it is okay to still not be okay in 2021. Like, it is okay. 2020 was so hard.
Yeah.
It was so hard. Nobody got out of 2020 without some type of emotional trauma, baggage, like nobody. So it's fine to just be like, I think I'm okay, but possibly not. So you're in my group. Let me know if something I do raises a red flag.
Yeah.
And I think that part of finding our new, I don't want to say like our new normal, but like part of finding that new peace with what's going on in the world and where you fit in the world is that seeing like this made me anxious, so maybe I should chill out, you know, or maybe I should go back to my pod that I had during COVID, or, you know, maybe I do need to wear my mask in certain places, because a lot of that also goes, like, anxiety is a real thing. Yeah. And just being out with people, like, I was really concerned about COVID, especially in China, where people were dying. Yeah. You know, people, it was so bad here, right? And even here, I was like, that first, you know, being in China, those first few weeks, and then people were just literally, and nobody knew what was going on. You know, doing that, I was like, now I understand zombie apocalypses now. And I realized that I'm not the one that's going to survive a zombie apocalypse, because I literally was like, I'm just going to stay here. And if it's going to get me, it's going to get me. But like, I can't go anywhere because I was so anxious. You were so, and I'm like,
there's no surviving, moving to the next city.
I gotta get out, and I felt like The Walking Dead. Like, I gotta make it miles to the airport, and then on the plane, and then am I gonna get bit before right? And so part of that is like, I think it is naive of us to not remember how we felt during COVID as we start to open back up.
Yes. Yeah.
And to remember how difficult those days were for us, and, you know, being concerned about family and our own health, but like those family members and those first responders and all of these people who are working in the middle of this pandemic. And I learned a lot from my kids just from them, you know, coming in and saying, you know, so-and-so wasn't feeling well, so I sent them a message, you know, blah, blah. And sometimes you get so caught up in yourself that you don't think about other people. Yeah. And their experiences.
Yeah. That's a hard one. But just by being, you know, it's so easy to get so wrapped up in like, I've got all these things happening in my own life.
And that's not healthy, because you can get so wrapped up that you get into yourself and you literally won't go anywhere. Yeah. And I had a lot of friends during COVID who were just like, so scared. I'm like, that's not healthy either. You know, that's not healthy. Yeah. To be so fearful that you're allowing that to hinder you from living, you know, even if you're in your house. Yeah. You know, a lot of people are just so scared. But when you're we've never been faced with an uncertainty like this. And so a lot of that was, you know, my experience was my mental health was pretty much surrounded by being displaced and not feeling connected to the life that I had before, and not knowing what was going to happen, you know, all of that. Then other people's mental health, you know, concerns during COVID were family members, you know, am I losing this family member? Or I did lose a family member. Now I'm coping with this weird and sudden loss. Yeah. That I couldn't even be there, you know, when they died. And I had friends like that. And I would see their experiences, and then I'd, you know, sit back and reflect and say, okay. But one of the things that I did realize, or that I did make sure to sort of acknowledge, is everybody has their struggle, right? And a lot of times we want to say that, well, other people have it worse, right? And so, you know, I should just be happy and I should just get over it because, you know, other people have it worse off, or other people are doing this. Right. That may be true, but you can not discredit your own feelings
Right.
and your emotions. Your emotions are valid for you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about mental health is like, sometimes we just say, oh, well, they're dealing with so much more, so I'm fine. You know, I'll get over it.
Yeah.
Because we want to compare our places, and not everybody is in the same place. Yeah. And when you do not acknowledge your feelings or validate your own feelings, then you can just squish them. Yeah. And then it becomes worse. Yep. So I also like encourage a lot of friends, it's still very valid. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. And it is okay to feel this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, true. Like I actually did therapy in college. Well, I've done it since then too, but like I started in college, and that was like one of the first things that I, was like, well, this was kind of upsetting to me, but that's small in the grand scheme of things. And she's like, what does that have to do with you though? Like, this is about you.
Your grand scheme.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. And like, I mean, one of the things that I always remember is like, she kept, like, every time I said something, she was like, well, how does that make you feel? And I always thought that was like, I mean, I don't know, mad, like, or whatever, whatever the emotion might have been. And I was like, why do you keep asking me that? And I'm like, well, it's therapy. It's about how do you feel.
I'm going to ask that question every day.
But also, like, that's a simple question. That's a simple thing that you can ask anybody when they come to you with something. How does that make you feel? And like, really, like, saying it out loud makes all the difference and really helps people to like process it. So like, that's something that if you can't afford therapy or if you're whatever, you're not able to get to therapy, or you are part of somebody's community, that's a simple question to ask.
I'm really big on like into social media, right? And one of the things that reminded me of is just the fact that every now and then I just ask, like, how are you today? Yeah. And part of it was, before I started asking that question, I actually like got on and talked about how it is okay to say I'm not, like, we're so conditioned to say, oh, how are you doing? I'm fine, I'm good. Like, stop saying that.
It's not a greeting, it's a question.
And that's so true. And if you do not say I'm good, then people don't know how to act.
Yeah.
First of all, they feel awkward because I wasn't trying to invest in you today. I did not really care. I was just saying something because it's socially acceptable, right? And so that I did that for a while. I was like, you all, if somebody's asking you how you're doing today, if you continue to just say, I'm fine, you're going to say that over and over and over again. Yeah, true. I'm not just going to spill my heart out to like random people, right? But I also have to acknowledge that sometimes if somebody asks me, how are you doing? I can just tell them, today it's not a good day. Yeah. And part of that also has to do with the person that you're talking to. You asked me that question. Yeah. You are responsible for the words that come out of your mouth, right? Yeah. So part of that is acknowledging the fact that I am also part of your community. I am asking you how you're doing. Mm-hmm. You just said you're not doing well. So what is my response now? Mm-hmm. And I think because people are so conditioned to sort of like be outside of other people's business, but also be out of other people's feelings, that they feel anxious when they're like, I'm not okay. And it's like, oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting this. Yeah. What do I say? Yeah. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Right. But you're not going to ask questions because
it's like, okay,
digging your hole deep.
Good luck with that.
I know. I'm praying for you today, friends, right? Yeah. I hope you feel better later, right? Oh my gosh. And I definitely started looking at myself and saying, can you be that person that you ask people and you are seriously asking them and are ready to respond to what they tell you honestly? Mm-hmm. And when I went through that really bad time in January, February, finally by spring break, I was like on the up and up. Then I realized how important it was for me when people asked me how I was doing and I felt comfortable being honest. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? You need to really work on being that person for other people. Mm-hmm. Even random people. Awesome. And so social media is really helpful because, it has given people a chance to sort of connect with other people who are common, ideas, common, themes, but also you don't have to be like next to each other. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people do feel more comfortable sharing things with others because that person's open.
Yeah.
And being not necessarily anonymous, but sort of, you know, being in that private message or, you know, answering that question in your little poll.
Typing through the tears versus actually trying to speak through
your
tears or whatever.
Or even like the slider, you know, I'm like, hey, slide it over. How you feeling today? And then, or like sometimes I'll even ask, you know, slide, you know, do you need somebody to send you a message tomorrow? Do you need somebody to check on you every day? Are you okay? You're okay today, but, you know, check on me in a little while. And that was so helpful because I realized like different people are in different stages and it's, you know, you flow, right? And, you know, your mental health is like your weight. You know, it goes. It's like, you know, it's like any other thing. And so it was actually helpful. And I actually saw myself being more aware of my friends because it's like, oh, they told me last week that they were doing okay, but they started feeling down, so I need to reach out to them. Right? And you feel more accountable.
What is next for you? I know you're going to China. Kind of give us like, how can people track your journey back to China?
Yeah.
Where can we follow you? I know you've got another live coming about mental health. Share.
So I am going back to China eventually.
Congratulations.
And I'll be there for the foreseeable near future. I'm not necessarily sure what's going to happen after this next contract, but that's kind of like the best part of sort of going with the flow, right? I'm not at that level yet, Erica. Like, find me a job that I can be a true nomad and watch me never come back. But I am always on social media sharing my experiences. So whether that's traveling or random cultural things that I do, because I always end up somewhere. Mental health has been my focus recently just because of my experiences. So I'm on social media. Briana Lynette is my handle on Instagram and Facebook.
There you go.
Yeah, so Briana Lynette. And currently I am focusing on sort of life as an expat and what it's sort of like.
Expat exactly?
An expatriate is somebody who lives in another country, and so you have left your country.
I was not getting that at all.
You have left your country and you are living somewhere else.
Gotcha.
So for a while I was focusing on mental health, and I do want to continue that because winter happens real quick in China, and I want to be able to talk about coming up my month being quarantined. That's going to be huge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, coming up on those winter experiences, and usually I'm able to share more once I've, you know, I'm back sort of in the life.
Yeah.
So I'll be sharing more about mental health and transitioning and what it's like living alone, and also sharing my life in China that will hopefully be somewhat, you know, normal once I get out and can travel. So yeah, that's what I'm focusing on.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.